guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be talking about part 2 of the Klein Trilogy, Survival of the Fittest, which is really a three-parter. Of course, I believe actual CD, the part 1's technically Klein's story, which is kind of its own thing, and then we move into Survival of the Fittest, which is really 3 parts. It takes place several adventures after Klein's story. The Doctor and her have been on several adventures now, and they end up on this planet inside basically like an insect hive. The Doctor compares them to bees a lot. They operate like bees, and thanks to the TARDIS's ability to translate language, that's really used effectively here, possibly more so ever, to where that's such a key part of the story. To translate with the bugs so they can communicate, because the bugs communicate by smell, by odor, by the smells they emit. So the TARDIS is having to translate that into verbal language and back and forth, which is really interesting to know that the TARDIS can do that it can translate that form of communication. That means the TARDIS could translate communication by farts. That's interesting. Thinking of Curse of the Fatal Deaths. That's pretty neat. The bugs believe pretty much anything they're told because, I guess because smells can't lie. They're a little gullible, but that comes in handy with the story. Sylvester McCoy is great in this. Tracy is great in this, as of course the 7th Doctor and Klein. One of my favorite parts about 7th Doctor audios is McCoy. He's really good here. It's like, you know, some people could treat something like this as just voice work to where they're just kind of phoning it in, but he doesn't. I mean, he always gives like 110% at these, because it's all these little nuances he does with his voice and how he pauses and how he does the lines. It's like he takes it just as seriously as the most important role he's ever had, which I guess the Doctor in a way could be called that, but he treats it just as seriously as he did on the show, which I always respect. I really like Tracy as Klein. She just has this professional bearing to her as a character Klein does, and just Tracy nails that. And so the Doctor finding out, it's really hard to review this story because it's really hard to review the story. Have you ever had a story that is so good in the sense that the components there, the story's fascinating and it's executed really well on audio, but for some reason it just doesn't quite grab you? This is kind of that. This is a story where it's a great story. It's a fantastic premise. It is done really well in the audio because this story would have been really hard to execute on screen, I feel like. But being on audio, it lets your imagination do all the visual work. And that's fantastic. I just picture these monumental set pieces for it, like when they're inside the hive and stuff. It's very fascinating. The audio does that really well at creating that mental image. But for some reason, I'm already like, will I ever listen to this again? Will I listen to this again? As much as I like everything going on in it, it doesn't leave me with that blown away impression with stuff like the Sword of Orion, Storm Warning, Jubilee, the end of the line from The Last Adventure. Stories like that do, where I know one day I will be going back to them because I loved them. This one has everything going for it. It just doesn't quite grab me. The incidental music is good in places. There's one piece in part 1 of incidental music that's really good, really good. Really liked it. The incidental music gets a little weird in part 4. Part 4 really shifts tonally. Or I guess part 3 technically it would be, because it's 3 parts. 3 parts. I guess it would be technically be part 3. Since part 1 is more just Klein's own story. But if I'm counting this as the final part of Survival of the Fittest, the music switches to rock music for a minute, kinda. It's a little weird. And then of course Klein pulls a kind of a fast one on the Doctor, which doesn't really surprise me. Klein doesn't strike me, this version of Klein doesn't strike me as someone you can trust, really. And you kind of feel like the Doctor may have felt like he's gotten through to her, because there are several unseen adventures we've had between the end of Klein and the start of the story. They allude to that at the beginning. And they seem like they at least have some kind of rapport together at this point. But you kind of find out that she's been playing him, you know, watching how he operates the TARDIS, so she could pull one out from under him at the end of the story. And that it's got a good cliffhanger, basically. The story ends on a good cliffhanger with the Doctor stranded without the TARDIS because Klein is taking it. It's a neat cliffhanger. It's kind of weird how the story just kind of goes that direction right at the end. There's several parallels between Klein and her future and some of the other people the Doctor runs onto on the planet. Yeah, it's really hard to do a review for this story because it's a great concept. It's a good story. It's executed well. Just for some reason, I'm left with, I don't quite know why. I'm just left going, and it's really hard to review because trying to review it feels like a chore. Whereas something like some of the other Big Finish stories, like Sword of Orion. Sword of Orion was also a chore because there's so much I want to talk about, and I don't want to talk about spoilers because I want you to go listen to it. This is a chore because I'm just like, God, do I have to? It feels like when you're 5 and you're told to clean your room, and you're like, that's how reviewing this feels. Like I just want to get it over with. But it's not bad. It isn't bad by any means. I loved the concept of the insectoids, the insects in it, and they're huge. They're not like insects, they're big. They're like the size of cars and tanks and stuff. And the rapport the Doctor forms with them, the rapport Klein forms with them, learning about the nature of their insect society and how it works, learning about the authority, which is basically what they call the Queen, and everything involved with it. It's really fascinating learning about the insect colony. And the voices of the insects, which again is the TARDIS translating, are really well done in this too. And you can tell, like, when a worker is talking, when a scout is talking, when a warrior is talking, fine Klein, fine Klein, fine Klein. That's really well done. Just at the end of the day, I don't know if I'll ever listen to it again. I don't know if I can be bothered, much like with this review. It's really hard. I don't know if I can be bothered. I found it well. You ever have that? You find something that's well made, well put together, hats off to the team, but you just don't really care for it. For some reason, you can't quite put your finger on. I found it fascinating, but a Thousand Tiny Cuts kind of has the same problem where it's enjoyable, but it doesn't really grab me. The best part so far to me has been Klein's story, which is mostly dialogue heavy, but it's very well written dialogue heavy. That one I could see myself going back to, especially at only at one part. So I found it quite fascinating, especially how it pulls McGann into the story too. This one I can't quite put my finger on it. The sequence of events it sets off are nice. It's a nice progression of events with other human characters coming into play as well. Just ultimately, that's really all I have. I know this review has been kind of everywhere. My apologies. I can't be bothered to redo it. That's just kind of how this story falls to me. It's just like, okay, I've given this story the best effort I can. Not the best effort it deserves, but the best effort I can. That's just where I am. So, Survival of the Fittest, Part 2 of the Klein Trilogy. Have you listened to it? Let me know what you think of it. If you understand kind of what I mean with my issue I'm having with it. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button. Links to the Patreon, the Amazon wish list, Amazon UK wish list, the P.O. boxes down there, all that fun stuff. I want to give a shout out to Colin Coney, one of my top tier patrons. I appreciate his support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. Most importantly, thank you for watching.